Hello, well, back into today's video. We're going to have a look at weather for the next 8 to 10 days. And today's video takes us to around the 20th of February. I'm very late with today's video, so I just want to get along with it very quick. But just say about me as there's links to articles on most pages at gazweather.com. Have a browse with widgets, anything that you're interested in, click through. Now, I've got very, very extreme cold weather coming up in the north and the east United States over the coming week to 10 days. And this will have a bit of an impact on our weather as well. But these are the upper air temperatures for Sunday the 15th of February, and look how cold the temperatures are in the north and the east of the states. We've got the minus 20 isotherm digging an extraordinarily long way south into southern and southeastern parts of the United States there, going below minus 20 to minus 25 in many of these northern and northeast states. I think this will be record-breaking cold, although it's very cold at the best of times in the winter in northern and eastern America. I think this will be breaking records in some places. This is a very extreme cold pattern. This is the polar vortex. We see in the newspapers in this country that whenever we get some kind of fleeting northerly, they go to town with stories about the polar vortex. This is what the polar vortex looks like when it drops out of the Arctic and into the mid-latitudes. Very, very extreme cold weather coming up. We did get the polar vortex in December 2010, but it's very unusual on our side of the Atlantic to get the polar vortex dropping in. But this can happen in America. It happened at times last winter, happening again this winter. So that's very extreme cold pushing south and east into America later this week, into weekend, and on into next week. This is the synoptic pressure chart. We see low pressure sitting to the east of the eastern seaboard of America, high pressure through central and western parts, and that squeezes those cold northerly winds down from Canada. And that cold will, although retreat a little bit at the start of next week, it comes back again through to the middle of next week. So this polar vortex again having another go, dropping in from Canada through the middle of next week. So the next week to 10 days in America going to be very extremely cold. This is a temperature anomaly. This is in Fahrenheit, so we're talking about temperature anomalies across many eastern and central parts of the state, sort of 8, 12 to 16 Fahrenheit below average. Some places going as low as 20 below average, and of course it's cold at the best of times at this time of year. So when you're talking about that level of cold, that is very, very extreme coming up for eastern and northern parts of the states. And I think we will be hearing about this on the news. It's going to be record-breaking, I would imagine, in some places. Now, this will have an effect on our weather. I said yesterday about got a bit of a battle going on between westerlies and easterlies. High pressure is trying to build over Scandinavia over weekend and into the start of next week, but the jet stream is going to become quite strong with this cold spilling out of America, and I think that's going to sort of keep that Scandinavian high at bay, but it's a close run thing. So these are the 500 millibar height anomaly flow charts. Got the ECM on the left, but GFS is on the right. 500 millibars is an area in the atmosphere where high pressure, low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. So we can see on both the charts we've got this very, very cold trough here in the east of the United States, in the north and the east United States, digging down a very, very long way southwards. And then, of course, as that runs out into the Atlantic, that cold air, it sort of enhances the jet stream. So we get the tight lines running across the Atlantic there, indicating that jet stream coming out of America into the Atlantic Ocean. And then we've got this ridge sitting up to the northeast, trying to get a foothold on the weather and bringing us easterlies over weekend and start of next week. But this jet stream is very strong, and I think it's going to probably keep that high pressure at bay. Could be close run thing. And also, because the air is so cold coming out of the Atlantic, we could start to bring in some colder sort of Atlantic air again, actually, next week. May start to dig some colder northwesterlies in. So overall, we're probably only looking at temperature anomalies coming out near normal, although it wants to be mild, but I think overall temperature anomalies will probably come out quite close to average. These are the temperature ensemble and precipitation ensembles from the GFS model. We can see we're quite warm actually in terms of the upper air temperature at the moment, but it's cool on the surface due to an inversion. We've got the red line here, which is the 30-year temperature average, so it's significantly above average at the moment, but it's cooler on the surface, as I say. Going to be cooling off as we go through towards the weekend, but you won't notice much difference in terms of the surface temperature. I'll also bring some rain for the weekend into the start of next week as well. Some of that could be quite heavy. There's no sign of anything particularly cold coming up here until maybe later on. This is sort of the final week of February over here, and there are quite a few cold members appearing then, so we may get a colder end to the month, perhaps winds going into the north. But in terms of the temperature anomaly for the coming week, it's actually coming out around average, the temp to the 18th. So these temperature anomalies around where you would expect at this time of the year. While the precipitation anomaly again comes out around average as well. That signal for a very prolonged dry spell is fading, and I think we will have some rain coming through over the weekend and into the start of next week. Now, we've got an area of low pressure coming in on Friday. This is a generic GFS chart, bringing this area of low pressure in off the Atlantic. That's going to stall across the country, so well, it's difficult to say where that's going, actually. It could go to the south and take most of the rain into France, but on this run of the GFS, it's over the country, so quite wet actually on Friday and into the weekend. See that low pressure just slinking away to the southeast, being blocked by high pressure sitting to the east. When another area of low pressure tries to get in on Sunday, but here's the high pressure building over Scandinavia at 1,030 millibars. So again, we've got a bit of a stall going on. How far in this low pressure gets, it's uncertain. There's not a particularly cold air mass sitting to the east of the country anyway, so even if this high pressure does take over the pattern, it could do on this sort of setup. You wouldn't rule it out that this high pressure is going to take over and swing the winds into the east next week. But even if it does, there's no really cold source of air sitting to the east, so you probably wouldn't be looking at anything desperately cold coming up next week anyway, even if that Scandinavian high was to develop. As you go through into Sunday and on into many of the high pressures there to the east of the country, blocking off the Atlantic, so it's certainly having a good go getting in, but it's really strong jet stream coming out of America. Look at these areas of low pressure around Newfoundland and to the south of Greenland. That's all associated with that extreme cold air that's coming down into the east of the states. And although this high pressure over Scandinavia does eventually get to 1,040 millibars, it gives a real good go at trying to take things over, it doesn't really come off, and it's the Atlantic that's still sort of driving this pattern, albeit it's very close. But what eventually happens by the time we're going through next week is that high pressure just builds over the country as a mid-latitude type feature. It could be quite pleasant actually by day, could be relatively mild, but there would be a risk of frost and fog by night. But we don't truly get into a block Scandinavian high pattern because of the strength of the jet stream, and the areas of low pressure in the Atlantic just don't allow it to come off. The east end is very similar. Here we are on Saturday with that low pressure over country storing. So Friday and Saturday could be really quite wet with outbreaks of rain. Then let's go through into Sunday. Again, another low pressure is trying to come in. This one perhaps being blocked further west. There is a chance with this on Sunday, but if this low pressure gets in far enough, it could produce some snow, and that's probably most likely over northern England and Scotland. But actually, I think it looks like this low pressure is going to stall generally to the west of the country on Sunday and won't get in far enough to produce that snow in the north, but it needs keeping an eye on. So high pressure looks like it's going to take over on Sunday, but on Monday, this next area of low pressure with a really deep cold pool over Greenland is sort of trying to get in and stopping that high pressure from taking things over. And eventually the high pressure sort of retreats back into western Russia, so these low pressures drive in. Now, it's quite cold air coming in with these low pressures from the Atlantic, so we could find showers turning wintry, particularly in the northwest. Seen a lot of that this winter, could go back to that again next week, for a time anyway, with those areas of low pressure. Midweek again, the Atlantic's driving through, and as we go through today, 10 Friday the 20th, again we're back to that quite cold northwesterly pattern again as the areas of low pressure are moving through the country, but high pressure is properly receded back into Russia now. Low pressure is all driving in off the Atlantic, but quite cold air coming in with those areas of low pressure, so again showers could turn wintry, particularly in the north and west. And that cold air driving in with those low pressures is tied in with the very extreme cold that's in the east of America, so quite an interesting pattern coming up over the next few days. Proper battle, I think, with high high pressure trying to get in over Scandinavia, but because of that extreme cold weather in America, it looks like the low pressure will sort of keep that high at bay. We'll probably have a relatively unsettled week next week, and because the air is so cold coming out of America, there could be some cold air even coming in from the Atlantic to us through the course of next week. Won't produce widespread cold conditions, but certainly enough at times, maybe early and then late in the week next week, to turn things wintry. Don't entirely rule out that high pressure over Scandinavia taking over and swinging the winds into the east. It's probably a low risk, only around 20%, but it is there. We've got to see what that high pressure over Scandi is doing. But even if it does pull winds into the east, there's no real cold pool actually sitting to the east of us, luckily or unluckily, depending on your point of view. So I don't think we'll be looking at bitterly cold easterly winds, even if the winds do get into the east. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.